How's it going, everybody? It's Parallax Abstraction, and this is the Geek Bravado Ramble. Yes, indeed. I'm on a bit of a blog roll lately, but wanted to do another one of these. I've been thinking about doing something like this for a while, and recent events made it a little more interesting. So I hope this sounds a little bit better this time. I have switched to a different piece of webcam recording software. The last couple of Geek Bravado Rambles had a real problem with the audio clipping and distorting. And that was I was using XSplit to record them, and like everything XSplit, it has lots of problems, so I'm using something else, so hopefully I'll sound a little bit better this time. So yeah, we are here today to talk about Steam. Oh yes, I've talked about Steam before on Geek Bravado a little bit, in various capacities, usually not very positive, and it's kind of what this is about today, but it's sort of a combination of a lot of things. You're probably thinking I'm here to talk about that whole paid mod fiasco. Well, I'm late to the party on that, I know, and I don't have a lot to say about it other than, like most people, I thought the program was really dumb. I thought it was well-intentioned, but horribly executed. There's a couple of videos I will link you guys to if you want more of sort of my opinion on that. The first one is another video by Super Bunny Hop, who did a thing on that, and it was a fairly passionate but also analytical video about the whole mod situation that I generally agree with. And also, if you got some time, a Total Biscuit hosted an almost 2 hours, I think it was longer than 2 hours actually, a sort of audio-only discussion with the guy who runs Nexus Mods and a popular mod creator talking about that. And that's some very interesting stuff there. That's generally what I think about that. I don't have a lot more to say about it, and that program, at least for the time being, is dead and gone, so hey. But the problem I have with Steam, moreover, is that they're sort of very laissez-faire, whatever it is, almost libertarian philosophy that they are taking to their storefront and new programs, and how that's really, really harming their platform, and how they, frankly, are only really getting away with some of this crap because, one, there's still a ton of Steam fanboys out there with their friggin' gay Ben worship. God, I think people who use that reference to the guy are stupid. There's a lot of Valve fanboys out there with their gay Ben worship, and also the fact that they have, as a result, in no small part because of this fanboy worship, Steam is basically a de facto monopoly on the digital distribution of PC games. They are not a true monopoly. There are alternatives out there, but everybody knows that the vast majority of people buy through Steam, and in addition to that, there are a number of games that you can only use through Steam. Even if you buy them somewhere else, they activate through Steam, and you are required to lock into that ecosystem Apple style. And that is a problem I've had for a long time. I mean, I have an epic Steam library. I've spent a kind of ridiculous amount of money on Steam over the years. I used to fall victim to the buy but never play Steam sale syndrome, which I thankfully got myself out of, but yeah, I have that too. So I am a very big Steam user. You know, it's on my machine. It runs at startup. I buy a lot of stuff from there. So don't get me wrong. I generally like the service and I like how it works. And it's most of the time where I will go first to buy stuff, if it's not through a discount retailer like Green Man Gaming or something like that. But Steam is doing a lot of stuff that is almost libertarian in nature. Now, what do I mean by libertarian? That's a word that gets thrown around a lot. I mean libertarian in the economic sense. The economic sense of libertarianism is essentially a total lack of regulation, and that the free market will sort of stabilize things and sort out everything and make things the best for everyone. Not to get too political here, but I think the strict adherence to the free market is an incredibly naive way of looking at the world, and it has been proven time and time and time again that relying on the free market to solve a situation never works. It usually results in a handful of people controlling everything and ruining it for everyone else. The idea, pure free market economics sounds like something that should work, but it doesn't in practice. It's a lot like communism that way. So that's kind of the thing about that. And Valve is applying that in many different ways to their service. They get an idea, they throw it at the wall, they see what happens, and most of the time they end up either having to change it or, in the case of paid mods, scrap it in the response to community feedback, usually backlash. And you can see this in a lot of different programs that they have, most of which are actually still around. You can see it in things as simple as the tagging system. You can see it in things like, well, Greenlight, obviously, is probably the biggest example. You can see it in the paid mod things. You can see it in some of the way their forums are policed, or rather not. The fact that they've given game developers the right to entirely police their own forums, including scrubbing any criticism. And now there's talk about them possibly implementing something that will allow them to game creators to basically ban someone from accessing the game on Steam. It's supposed to be to ban people who are exploiting or cheating or all that stuff, but apparently it's wide open. A game developer can ban you for whatever reason. Went on their forums and complained that the game was buggy, you lose access to the content you paid for, which is nuts. But it's libertarianism really in the sort of Andrew Ryan rapture kind of way. And it's very interesting that Valve continues to try this despite the fact that it is proven time and time again to not work. And I find that very, very interesting. So if you break down a couple of things here, I mean, paid mods, again, Super Bunny Hop goes into exquisite detail of what went on with that. I'm not going to reiterate it, but the paid mod thing was a big example of that. The tagging system was a huge nightmare when it first came out. They deployed it. They allowed people to sort of tag games whatever they wanted. And we had all the controversy about people tagging games like Gone Home, you know, Walking Simulator, feminist propaganda, all this other stuff. And it ended up happening that Valve had to step in and regulate it. They had to say certain tags were not allowed to be used, and they took out a lot of the offensive ones, but there are also certain ones. I think Walking Simulator was frankly a fairly valid tag to use, and they removed that. They removed a bunch of other ones arbitrarily based on the feelings of someone at the company. Greenlight, I don't know why Valve continues to push Greenlight. Greenlight is an absolute disaster of a system. They came out with it basically because they were too lazy to manually evaluate and approve other games. They didn't want to hire people to do that. And they basically thought, well, we're going to create this system and let the community choose stuff, except that system has been completely gamed. There are services apparently you can participate in that will just buy, you can just buy Greenlight votes with to get your game through. There's tons of developers who've done things like scummy developers who said, we'll give free keys to everyone who votes for the game because generating a key and handing it out pretty much doesn't cost anything. And that's how they've approached it. The system has been completely gamed, and some absolute abhorrent garbage has gotten through Greenlight. A lot of it has. And the problem is Greenlight, once again, is not a true libertarian system because certain companies get to jump the queue. If you're a publisher of note, if you're a developer of note, pretty much purely at Valve's discretion, they can just take your game in and approve it the normal way, and you get to skip the whole Greenlight process. So it's not a level playing field. Greenlight applies only to the non-elite clique that Valve decides to give special treatment. So it's broken on its face right there. And obviously you've seen all the garbage that's gotten onto Steam as a result of that. And beyond that, all the garbage that's gotten onto Steam through their actual publishing partners. You know, they have companies like Strategy First that are allowed to put whatever they want on Steam. So they've dumped a back catalog of shovelware, you know, a lot of which doesn't even work. And it's just there. And people are finally starting to get sick of this. The response to this paid mod thing, I think, was finally the straw that broke the camel's back. A lot of people who would normally very staunchly defend Gabe Newell and Valve with their lives were like, nah, this isn't cool. And Gabe Newell did a Reddit AMA. I didn't read it, but he did this AMA in response to it where a lot of his very PR-y answers were getting downvoted to hell and gone, which is something that never happens when he does anything on Reddit, because Reddit is full of Valve fanboys. And there's been a lot of backlash to that, and while they still have their staunch defenders, there are a lot of people out there who are saying, you know what, this isn't cool. I think this company needs to be a little more cautious with how they approach some things, and that they're potentially abusing their de facto monopoly position in order to do this stuff, a lot of which is frankly very anti-consumer. I don't really know how you can look at the paid modding situation and how that was laid out and say that it was anything other than both anti-consumer and anti-modder. The only people who really benefited from that system were Valve and Bethesda, no one else. And I don't think they would have done this if they didn't have their de facto monopoly position. And the problem that Valve has, I think, to a certain degree, is that if you know a lot about Valve, you know that they employ a very interesting corporate structure. They have what's called a flat system, and a flat system is very simple. It means that no one has a formal job title and there is no hierarchy. Now, in reality, that's never, much like any other free market system, that's not really true. There always is a hierarchy. Legally, there has to be. Gabe Newell is still technically the CEO of Valve. And they say that because of their flat system, the way it works is, you know, if Gabe Newell comes up and asks you to do something, you can just say no. But yeah, how many times has that happened, I wonder? But the true thing behind a flat system is that everyone has the same job title. Everyone has the same rank, seniority position, and people can literally choose their own job. So if you get, the idea at Valve is supposed to be, if you have a good idea for something, you can just pick up your desk, roll into an empty part of the office, because all the desks are on wheels. You roll into a different part of the office, you can try to recruit people who like your idea, and you can develop it and roll with it. That's apparently how paid modding happened. That's how most of what's happened on Steam has taken place, is people get an idea, they develop it, and the idea is that Valve wants to ship ideas in quantity. So you develop something, you get it out there, you respond to feedback, and you alter it how it goes. Rapid iteration. That's kind of the idea. And it sounds, again, like a lot of libertarian type ideals, it sounds good on paper, but it's not necessarily. And this is the problem. The people who were in charge of the paid modding thing clearly didn't understand the modding community or mod consumers at all. Apparently, the rumor is it was like 2 people at Valve and 2 people at Bethesda who were working on this. These people clearly had no idea how this stuff needed to work. And it was such a botched launch that there was no way they could recover from it. So rather than just say, well, we're going to iterate and tweak this, they just had to yank the whole thing back. And maybe one day they'll deploy it again. But the way they did it just didn't work at all. And the problem with that when you have a flat structure is that while a flat structure sounds good on paper, and anyone who's worked under a shitty manager, like, you know, me included, would look at a system like that and go, oh, that sounds so amazing. The problem, though, is managers are often necessary. You often need someone to tell you when something's a bad idea or to tell you no. If you get a good idea at Valve and you manage to make a pitch to a few employees to get a group together to work on that idea, the problem is you have a group full of people who all think it's a good idea already, even if it isn't. There have been a lot of ideas throughout history that have been really bad ideas, but that had very, very large followings. And you often need someone who can look at something objectively from the outside without a vested interest in it and go, you know, maybe you should change this or alter this, or sometimes just go, you know what, this is a bad idea and I think you don't know what you're getting into here and you shouldn't do it. There's no such thing like that in a flat structure, not generally. Apparently there are other flat structure game developers out there. Apparently Naughty Dog is a flat structure, but it's a flat structure in that they have co-presidents at the top that everything flows through. They have 2 or 3 people who are above the grid and whose job it is to have approval over things. Everyone else is flat. Valve apparently is totally flat. And I think a more libertarian free market philosophy is really what a flat structure is based around. And I think that's where we're starting to see problems in something like this. And the problem is Steam, because it was very early to the party, became such a dominant force in this that there's nothing to stop them. Before this paid mod backlash, there was nothing to make them step back and go, whoa, you know, maybe we need to reevaluate how we approach things here. And I'm sure there's some very interesting discussions happening internally at Valve right now, because the problem is, if they don't want to keep doing things like this, then they're going to have to develop some kind of system of oversight or peer review or communal approval. They're going to have to do something where if a group comes together and makes an idea and wants to deploy it, someone or a group of people is going to have to look at it and give it the go-ahead or not. And that breaks the whole thing, right? Because you don't really have a flat structure anymore when you do that. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Valve approaches that, and I think they're going to have some very hard conversations, because if they don't do that, this is not going to be the last time a blunder like this is going to happen. And as I've said before, things like Greenlight and the tagging system and some of these other things manage to survive without severely cracking the company because they have a de facto monopoly position and a legion of fanboys who will defend them. But the paid modding situation really put a chink in that armor, and they can't they have too many more screw-ups like this, and a lot of that goodwill is going to get eroded, and that's not going to be good for them. So they're going to have to figure that out. And the problem is, I really like what Steam could be, but it's almost dystopian in its libertarianism in terms of how it's being done, because you can see things like these dumb, ill-conceived, half-assed initiatives coming out, but you also see other things that aren't being dealt with. You know, the Steam client, the UI is still very dated, the client is bloated, it's buggy, it has lots of weird problems. Features that Valve announced a long time ago have never been iterated on, like in-home streaming still has some lag issues and still doesn't do surround sound and all these other things, and it's not really being iterated on. Because again, in a flat structure system, if you have a group of people, say the people who developed in-home streaming got bored with it, or got another idea and was like, hey, we want to go work on this. In a proper libertarian flat structure system, there's nothing to stop them from doing that. So in-home streaming, if they've decided they don't want to work on that anymore, may never get any better. That's just one aspect of it. But Steam as a whole needs a lot of other stuff done to it. It needs a lot of work. It needs a lot of improvements that's not necessarily getting done. The Steam website is a bloody disaster, and it has been for a long time, and we still have lots of problems with things like the front page getting clogged up by shovelware releases because they're not properly policing that, and all the garbage that's coming out on Steam. There are two schools of thought I have written in the past in response to people like Jim Sterling, who have said that Steam needs quality control, that Steam doesn't need quality control so much as it needs quality service. They can dump all the garbage they want on Steam, but you should have a right to ask for a refund if the product you buy either doesn't work or is hot garbage. But that's another thing that Steam has done, that is in that they want their true free market system, but on their terms. They have staunchly avoided doing things like refund policies. The EU forced them to do one, and then they just altered their end user license agreement to basically say, if you so much as even look at Steam, you waive your right to this refund, this legally entitled refund. Anyone who has ever tried to deal with Steam's customer service, like I have a few times, knows what an unbridled nightmare that is. Like, I have dealt with big cable and phone companies before, sort of the hallmarks of bad service. I've had tickets that I've submitted to Steam that have auto-closed themselves 3 times in a row because it's taken literally 6 weeks to get a response, and then the response I get from Steam doesn't answer the question I asked. Like, their customer service is absolutely abhorrent. It is one of the worst things I've ever seen. But again, it's a flat company. If you were working in a company where you could choose your own job, would you want to work customer service? Yeah, I don't think so. I sure as hell wouldn't. And that's the problem. Unless they want to outsource their customer service, which we all know how that usually works out, but it works better than the way it is now. I don't know how they fix that. You know, again, you can't assign people to be customer service if you want to have a truly flat structure company. And when Valve was a lot smaller and had its hands in a lot fewer pies, maybe the flat structure would work. But maybe they're starting to have a realization that at the point they're at now, you can't really do that anymore. You've got to have a more, at least certain aspects of the company have to be a little bit more structured in order to provide the level of service to your customers that they deserve and that they expect from you and that you built your reputation on. Valve's entire reputation and their fanboyism is built on their incredible reputation for customer service and being consumer first. And things like the paid mod system are the polar opposite of that. I think Greenlight is the polar opposite of that in many ways. I think the shovelware and stuff that we see is the polar opposite of that. They need to figure that out, because Valve's libertarian dystopia is not something consumers are going to be willing to tolerate forever. Monopolies often tend to stay that way, but monopolies can crumble with some severe missteps. And this isn't like a situation where you've only got one option for your internet, where you know, if you want a particular service, you have to go through a certain company. There are alternatives to Steam out there, and if people get pushed hard enough, they may choose to make use of them. And Valve's incredible fanatical goodwill can only carry them so far. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. But Steam has got some major problems, and, you know, I've been using the service for a long time, and I'm getting really, really frustrated with it. I am glad that they didn't stick with the paid mod system like they did with Greenlight and some other things. I'm glad the pushback was so severe that they went, oh, Jesus, we fucked up. Okay, we're going to turn this off, and maybe we'll come back to it later. At least they learned something from that. They're usually very, very stubborn, and they usually leave a system up and either say they'll iterate on it and never do, like Greenlight, or they'll go, no, give it a while, you'll get it. You know, you'll get why this is so good. Paid modding, they understood that they completely underestimated what everybody wanted. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens there. So, but I just wanted to talk about that. I hope, and I wanted to shed a little light on that and why. Because a lot of people are asking why Valve has been doing some of these dumb things, and I think that's the reason why. I think it's they are a flat structure company, and I think that is born from a libertarian business person philosophy. And I do think Gabe Newell probably shares that to a certain degree. I mean, he was a Microsoft executive before he founded Valve. You know, he's a big business guy, and that type of thinking tends to come from a lot of big companies. And when he left Microsoft, which is an incredibly structured company to a suffocating degree, as I understand it, he wanted out of that structure and he wanted to do something else, and that's why he chose this. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think it means Gabe Newell is evil, but I think he's also learning that what sounds like a good idea, and probably is in certain situations, maybe doesn't scale infinitely. And the concept of this flat company is something that maybe Valve is a little too big to employ globally across the board. Maybe some structure is necessary, because in a true free markets that regulate themselves are a myth. They do not exist. And at certain points, regulation is always necessary. True libertarians never want to admit that, but history has shown time and time again that a lack of regulation is never good for the people at the bottom, which is the consumers in this case. So it's going to be interesting. Definitely going to be interesting. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you found this interesting. If you like what you saw, please like and subscribe. It does help me out a great deal, as always. I am probably going to be, there's going to be another Retro Flashback going up soon, may even go up before this, and I have my next PXA Plays game, which I might as well announce here, but the series will start. I'm going to do a Plays of Westerado Double Barreled, which just came out recently. It was originally a web game and a standalone version on Steam, just came out actually. And it's a really interesting game with some really different mechanics, and it's retro, very much retro looking, retro production values, and it looks badass, and I really want to go through that. And it's probably not going to be a long play series. It's a replayable game, but one session apparently only takes a few hours, so we'll see how that goes. But I'm looking forward to doing that. So watch this space, and you'll see that pretty soon, I think. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see y'all next time. Take it easy.